Before he was the Eye, before the Ring, before the towers of Barad-dûr ever rose from the ash of Mordor, he was Mairon the Admirable, a spirit of fire, devoted to order, beauty, and perfect design. He loved harmony, and that love is what made him the greatest Dark Lord the world would ever know. Today, on Echoes of Middle-earth, we follow Sauron's entire story, from the music before time to the fires of Mount Doom and the last fading echo of his shadow.
When most people hear the name Sauron, they picture a great burning eye, a metal giant in black armor, or a distant shadow looming over the mountains of Mordor. But Tolkien's Sauron is far more complex than a symbol of evil. He is a Maia, a powerful spirit created before the world. Once a servant of Aule, the smith of the Valar. Later, the most trusted lieutenant of Morgoth, the original Dark Lord. A master of craft, deception, and control. And in the end, a disembodied will clinging to one last hope, a golden ring. Across 3 ages, Sauron changes shape, strategy, and style of rule. But one thing never changes: his obsession with order, control, and bending all things to a single design, his own. In this video, we'll walk through his entire life. Before time in the First Age, Mairon, Angband, and the Isle of Werewolves. The Second Age, the Rings of Power, the fall of Eregion, Numenor, and the Last Alliance. The Third Age, the Necromancer of Dol Guldur, the Wars of Gondor, and the War of the Ring. So let's begin where his story truly starts, not in Mordor, but in the thoughts of a god before the world was even made.
Long before there was a sun or a moon, before Middle-earth had mountains or seas, there was only Eru Ilúvatar and the Ainur, the Holy Ones, the powers of Tolkien's world. Among the lesser but still mighty spirits, the Maiar, there was one who stood out for his great skill and clarity of mind. His name was Mairon, which means the Admirable. Mairon served Aule, the Vala of crafting, metal, stone, and making. Under Aule, he learned how to shape matter with precision, how to design, measure, and refine, how to bring order from chaos through craft. In another life, had he stayed loyal, Mairon might have become one of the greatest guardians of the world's beauty and structure. He hated waste, he despised randomness, he loved systems that worked flawlessly. And that love is where his corruption begins.
For Mairon, order itself became the ultimate good. He didn't just want things to be beautiful, he wanted them to be efficient, controlled, and obedient to a single will. He began to think, why should others be allowed to resist? Why should the world be left to chance, weakness, or failure? If someone strong enough could command everything, wouldn't that be better? And in this thought, he found a kindred spirit, but in the wrong master. Melkor, later known as Morgoth, was the mightiest of the Valar, and the first to rebel against Ilúvatar. Where Aule wanted to build, Melkor wanted to rule. He too desired to shape reality to his will, but with domination and destruction rather than patient craft. Mairon watched Melkor, saw his power, saw how fear and strength could bend others into obedience, saw that Melkor wasn't bound by hesitation, mercy, or doubt. To someone obsessed with order and control, this looked effective. So Mairon made the choice that would define his existence. He left the path of Aule and pledged himself to Melkor. From that point on, the Admirable became a shadow in the service of a greater darkness. The Sindarin Elves would later call him Gorthaur, the Terrible Dread. And in time, the world would know him by a single name: Sauron.
In the earliest days, Morgoth raised 2 fortresses in the far north: Utumno, the great deep stronghold; Angband, the western fortress and forward bastion. Morgoth himself ruled from Utumno. To Angband, he appointed his most trusted servant, Sauron. When the Valar finally moved against Morgoth in the Battle of the Powers, they laid siege to Utumno, broke his main stronghold and took Morgoth captive and carried him to Valinor in chains. The Valar also searched Angband, but Sauron slipped away. While his master was imprisoned in Valinor for 3 ages of the world, Sauron remained in Middle-earth, silent, hidden, and waiting. We know little about those long years, but we can imagine him. Studying the lands of Middle-earth, learning how fear moves the hearts of elves and men, preparing for the day when Morgoth would return. And that day came. After centuries of seeming repentance, Morgoth was released and soon betrayed the mercy of the Valar. He stole the Silmarils, destroyed the 2 trees of Valinor, and fled back to Middle-earth. From that moment on, Morgoth no longer fought alone. His shadow was accompanied by another, more subtle, more calculating, Sauron.
As Morgoth entrenched himself in Angband and battled the Noldor, Sauron was given important roles in his master's war. For the first centuries of the First Age, Morgoth struggled more than he expected. The Noldor, under leaders like Fingolfin, Fingon, Maedhros, and others, held powerful realms and strong fortresses. Morgoth suffered many setbacks, but in the year FA 455, he shattered the balance. He unleashed the Dagor Bragolak, the Battle of Sudden Flame. Fields burned, realms were devastated. The long-held siege of Angband was broken. Amid this chaos and despair, Sauron saw an opening. In the narrow pass between the great mountain ranges of Eredwethrin and Dorthonion lay an island, Tol Sirion. Upon it stood a tall tower, Minas Tirith, not the later Gondorian city, but its older namesake. This tower watched the western passes. If it fell, Morgoth's forces could swarm south and east unchecked. Sauron took the task. We're told that when he came against the isle, a great shadow of fear fell upon the defenders. Orodruin, the warden of the tower, and his people were struck with terror. Sauron had grown into something more than a war captain. He was now a sorcerer, master of shadows and illusions, skilled in breaking wills and bending minds. The tower fell. Tol Sirion was taken. Under Sauron, the island became Tol Ingarhoth, the Isle of Werewolves.
Sauron did not only command beasts, he made them into something worse. He bred monstrous wolves in the service of Morgoth, bound evil spirits into their bodies, twisting them into werewolves. He ruled them as their lord. Here, his fascination with control and terror reached a new refinement. He could dominate bodies, minds, and even spirits. He used fear not just as a weapon, but as a system. Tol Ingarhoth became a place where prisoners vanished into underground dungeons. Screams of captives echoed through the tunnels. No living creature could pass unnoticed. Sauron watched all from his tower. This is the Sauron we meet in one of the most legendary stories in Tolkien's world, the tale of Beren and Luthien.
After the Dagor Bragolak, survivors in Dorthonion turned to guerrilla warfare. Among them was Barahir and his son Beren. Morgoth ordered Sauron to destroy these outlaws. To do this, Sauron used not just force, but deceit. One of Barahir's companions, Gorlam, had lost his wife, Eiluned. Sauron's servants lured him with an illusion, a vision of his wife alive. Captured, tortured, and taunted with this phantom, Gorlam finally broke. He agreed to trade information for the chance to be reunited with her. It was a lie, of course. Sauron revealed that Eiluned had long been dead, mocked Gorlam for his betrayal, promised he would indeed join her, and had him cruelly executed. With the information extracted, Sauron's forces fell upon Barahir's camp. They killed everyone except Beren, who happened to be away. Beren later avenged his father and recovered Barahir's ring, a a token that would pass down the ages all the way to Aragorn. But for Sauron, this was simply one task completed. Morgoth, however, was not done with Beren.
Beren's path would eventually lead him to Doriath, where he met Luthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian. Their love story is one of Tolkien's greatest. Thingol, however, tried to make Beren's quest impossible. He demanded a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown as the bride price. This wild challenge put Beren directly in the path of Sauron. Beren and Finrod Felagund, Galadriel's brother, along with 10 companions, set out for the north. To pass Sauron's Isle, Finrod used his magic to disguise them as orcs. But Sauron had given strict orders. All movements were to be reported to him. When this band passed without doing so, Sauron grew suspicious. He captured them and brought them before him. Here we get a glimpse of an astonishing duel. Finrod and Sauron contest each other in songs of power. Both were mighty, but Sauron prevailed. He stripped away their disguises and identities, though he could not yet discover their purpose. When the captives refused to speak, Sauron threw them into a deep pit. One by one, a werewolf descended and devoured them. Yet none betrayed their companions. At last, only Finrod and Beren remained. When the werewolf attacked Beren, Finrod used all his remaining power to slay the beast and died from his wounds. The king of Nargothrond fell in darkness in a dungeon of Sauron. This moment alone would be enough to mark Sauron as one of the great villains of Tolkien's world, but his story isn't done.
While Sauron believed he had broken his enemies, Luthien was already on her way. She came to Tol in Gaurhoth, accompanied by Huan, the great hound of Valinor. Sauron saw her from his tower and knew who she was, daughter of Maia, princess of Doriath. He chose not to kill her outright. Instead, he wanted to capture her and hand her over to Morgoth, a prize beyond measure. He sent wolves to the bridge, and Huan killed them all. Finally, Sauron sent Draugluin, sire of the werewolves. Huan defeated him too. Draugluin staggered back to Sauron, gasped out the name Huan, and died. Now Sauron understood the true danger before him. This was the hound whom prophecy said could only be slain by the mightiest wolf of all. So he decided he would become that wolf. Sauron took the form of a monstrous werewolf, greater than any that had yet walked the world. His approach was so terrifying that even Huan hesitated. The air itself seemed to darken with his presence. He leapt at Luthien. She threw her magical cloak before his eyes, blinding him and weighing him down with sleep and exhaustion.
Huan sprang, and the two fought a savage, brutal battle. Sauron fought with all his might, shifting from wolf to serpent and back. Still, he could not escape the hound's jaws. Huan held him fast. At last, Sauron had a choice: abandon his body and flee as a naked spirit, or submit to Luthien. She offered him terms: yield the mastery of the Isle, and she would release him. Sauron surrendered. He gave up Tol in Gaurhoth and fled, shedding his form and taking the shape of a vampire-like shadow. He fled to Tower Nufoin, spreading horror and fear across the dark forest. Luthien then broke open Sauron's dungeons, freed the prisoners, brought Beren back from the pit, and left the island ruined. For Sauron, this was his first great defeat. He had tasted what it meant to bow to someone else's will, and he would never forget the humiliation.
As the First Age neared its end, the Valar finally responded to the cries of Middle-earth. The host of the West, led by Eonwë, came to wage the war of wrath against Morgoth. Dragons in the sky, Balrogs and orcs on the ground, vast armies clashing across Beleriand. In the end, Angband was broken. Morgoth was cast down. He was bound in chains and cast into the timeless void. And what of Sauron?
He took on a fair form and came before Eonwë. He claimed to repent. Eonwë told him if he truly wished to be forgiven, he must go to Valinor and submit to the judgment of Manwë. Sauron balked. He could repent in front of a herald, but not walk humbled into the west and stand under the eyes of the Valar. His pride would not allow it, so he fled. He hid in Middle-earth, nursing his resentment, watching the world rebuild. And when he judged that the Valar were once again distant, Sauron decided to become what Morgoth had been, the new Dark Lord.
At the dawn of the Second Age, Sauron was in hiding. For several centuries he brooded in the east and south, gathered followers among those people who had once served Morgoth, tested how far he could push his influence without drawing the direct wrath of the Valar again. By around SA 500, he concluded, the Valar would not intervene directly in Middle-earth again. The new great power rising was Numenor, an island realm of the Edain. If he wanted to rule, he would have to outsmart elves and men. By around SA 1000, Sauron established himself in Mordor, a land ringed by mountains, guarded by harsh lands and ash, dominated by a fiery mountain the elves called Orodruin, Mount Doom. There, Sauron began building his great fortress, Barad-dûr.
Sauron then made his most brilliant and dangerous move. Around SA 1200, he put on a new face, a fair form of great wisdom and nobility. Calling himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, he went to the Elves of Eriador. To the High King Gil-galad in Lindon and to Elrond, he offered knowledge, but they distrusted him and turned him away. So Annatar turned instead to Eregion, the realm of the jewelsmiths, ruled by Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor. There he found eager students. Sauron taught them hidden lore, helped them refine their craft, encouraged them to forge rings of power that could preserve beauty, delay decay, maintain realms against time. Celebrimbor and the Gwaith Ymir Dane became the greatest smiths of their age, surpassed only by Feanor himself. By SA 1500, they began forging the Rings of Power. After about a century of collaboration, the first 16 Rings of Power were completed. Sauron then returned to Mordor. In SA 1600, in the fires of Mount Doom, he wrought his masterwork, the One Ring. Into it, he poured much of his own power and will. Through it, he intended to dominate the wearers of the other rings, and through them, the peoples of Middle-earth. The ring bore a terrible inscription in the Black Speech. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. When he first put the ring upon his finger, Sauron revealed his presence to the elves, tried to bend their wills to his own, but he had miscalculated, because 3 rings had been forged by Celebrimbor alone, in secret. Narya, Nenya, and Vilya. Sauron had never touched them, but even these were tied to the One. The elves sensed his treachery immediately. They removed their rings and hid them. Sauron's plan to enslave the elves outright had failed.
Filled with wrath, Sauron demanded that the elves surrender all the rings, claiming that without his knowledge, they could never have been made. The elves refused. So began the War of the Elves and Sauron. Sauron completed the Black Gate of Mordor, raised vast armies of orcs, trolls, and men under his sway, invaded Eriador. Eregion was attacked, its capital Ost-in-Edil besieged. Gil-galad sent Elrond with an army to help, but they could not save the realm. Eregion was destroyed. Celebrimbor was captured, tortured, and killed. his body displayed as a standard of Sauron's victory. Sauron seized the 16 rings, but he never learned the location of the 3. Elrond managed to lead survivors north and founded Imladris, Rivendell, as a hidden refuge. For a time, Sauron's power in Eriador seemed overwhelming. By SA 1699, he controlled most of the region. This was the height of his territorial power. But Sauron had made another enemy, Numenor.
The kings of Numenor were powerful mariners, and they saw the growing shadow in the east. When Gil-galad called for help, Numenor answered. Armies of Numenor landed in Eriador with such might that Sauron's forces were swept aside. He was driven back, defeated in battle after battle, until he fled once more to Mordor with only a small guard. He did not forget this humiliation. Over 1,000 years later, his chance for revenge came. By then, the Númenóreans had grown proud and estranged from the Valar. Their last and mightiest king, Ar-Pharazôn, heard of Sauron proclaiming himself king of men and lord of the earth. Insulted, Ar-Pharazôn sailed to Middle-earth with a fleet so vast that Sauron's armies fled. Sauron knew he could not win by force, so he chose another path. He surrendered. Allowed himself to be taken as a captive to Numenor. Once there, he did what he always did best. He talked. Under the guise of Zigur, the wizard, Sauron slowly became the king's advisor, the voice whispering in Ar-Pharazôn's ear, the high priest of a dark new cult. He turned many Númenóreans away from the Valar, encouraged the worship of Melkor as Lord of all, giver of freedom, ordered the cutting down of the White Tree, built a great temple where human sacrifices were made in Morgoth's name. Finally, he convinced Ar-Pharazôn to attempt the ultimate rebellion, to sail to the Blessed Realm, to seize immortality by force. Ar-Pharazôn's fleets landed on the shores of Valinor itself. At that moment, Eru Ilúvatar intervened directly. The world was changed. Numenor sank beneath the sea. Ar-Pharazôn and his army were buried. The shape of the world became round, and the straight road was closed to mortal ships. Sauron was in Numenor when it fell. His body was destroyed, but his spirit survived, sustained by the power he had placed in the One Ring. He fled back to Middle-earth, horribly diminished, but not gone. From that day forward, he could never again appear fair. His form would always reflect his inner corruption. If the first age made him cunning, the second age made him cruel. And he still had one more war to fight. After the downfall of Numenor, survivors of the faithful, led by Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion, founded Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. Sauron hated them. In SA 3429, he struck. He captured Minas Ithil, burned its White Tree, and forced Isildur to flee down the Anduin. In response, Elendil and Gil-galad formed the last alliance of elves and men. They marched into Mordor. In SA 3434, they won the Battle of Dagor-Lod. For 7 years, they besieged Barad-dûr. At last, Sauron himself came forth. We imagine him not as a giant of molten metal, but as Tolkien described, a terrible figure, tall and dark, of more than human stature, but not absurdly huge, radiating malice and power. On the slopes of Mount Doom, Elendil and Gil-galad fought Sauron and cast him down, but both were slain. Isildur then took up the hilt shard of his father's sword, cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand, and claimed it as Weregild for the death of his father and brother. Sauron's body was destroyed, his power was broken, but the ring was not destroyed, and as long as it endured, his spirit could slowly gather strength again.
The Second Age ended in fire and loss for both sides. Isildur kept the ring. On his way north, he was ambushed in the disaster of the Gladden Fields, and the ring was lost in the river Anduin. For centuries, Sauron's spirit lingered in the east, bodiless, recovering. His former servants and client kingdoms fell into chaos, war, and decay. Around TA 1000, a shadow began to grow in the forest of Greenwood the Great. It settled on a hill called Amon Lanc, which became known as Dol Guldur, the Hill of Sorcery. The being that dwelt there was called the Necromancer. It was Sauron. For a long time, he hid his identity even from the wise, strengthening himself in secret. At the same time, evil stirred elsewhere. Orcs multiplied in the misty mountains. Dragons troubled the north. The Nazgul returned. Human realms weakened under plague and war. Sauron's hand was never far from these events, even when unseen.
Concerned by the growing shadow, the White Council was formed. Saruman, Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, and others. In PA 2063, Gandalf went secretly into Dol Guldur to investigate. Sauron, not yet ready to reveal himself, fled into the east. This began a long period called the Watchful Peace. But Sauron was not idle. In the east, he bound more Easterling tribes to his will. In the south, he stirred up Haradrim and other peoples. He rebuilt networks of servants and allies. By TA 2460, he felt strong enough to return. Once again, the Necromancer occupied Dol Guldur. Almost at once, by chance, the ring was found by a creature called Smeagol near the Gladden Fields. He became Gollum. Sauron searched for news of the ring, watched the descendants of Elendil, strengthened his hold in both Mordor and Mirkwood. The White Council debated whether to act. Saruman, consumed by secret envy and his own schemes, delayed any direct assault.
Sauron's strategy in the north was dangerous and subtle. Orc strongholds in the Misty Mountains blocked east-west travel. Dol Guldur menaced Lothlorien in the Woodland Realm. Smaug the dragon ruled Erebor, threatening Dale and the surrounding lands. If Sauron could ally with Smaug, coordinate attacks from Dol Guldur and Mordor, he could crush the north and then close a vice around Rohan and Gondor. Gandalf saw this clearly. This is part of why he pushed for the quest of Erebor and the attack on Smaug.
In TA 2845, Sauron's forces captured Thrain II, Thorin's father, and imprisoned him in Dol Guldur. Sauron took from him one of the 7 dwarven rings. 5 years later, Gandalf infiltrated Dol Guldur, learned that the Necromancer was indeed Sauron, and urged the White Council to act. Saruman stalled, partly because he wanted the ring for himself, and partly because he believed it still lay in the Anduin. Finally, in TA 2941, several things happened almost at once. The White Council agreed to an attack on Dol Guldur. Gandalf left Thorin and Bilbo at the edge of Mirkwood and went south. Smaug was slain by Bard. The Battle of 5 Armies decimated Orc forces in the north. The Council assaulted Dol Guldur and drove Sauron out. But this was Sauron's backup plan all along. He had already been rebuilding Mordor. The Nazgul had returned to Minas Morgul and Barad-dûr was rising again. He simply withdrew to his true seat of power.
From TA 2951 onward, Sauron openly declared himself in Mordor. Barad-dûr was rebuilt. The fires of Mount Doom awakened again. The lands around became a furnace of industry and war. He sent 3 Nazgul to reoccupy Dol Guldur, stirred Harad, Rhûn, and other lands into alliance, extended the Shadow of Mordor, a spiritual and psychological oppression that sapped hope and joy. He no longer wasted effort on appearing fair. His rule was naked tyranny.
Sauron also possessed a palantir, the Ithil Stone, captured when Minas Ithil fell centuries earlier. Through it, he could influence other Seeing Stone users, project terror and despair. He used it to trap Saruman, who had begun using the Orthanc Stone, show carefully selected images to Denethor, steward of Gondor, feeding his hopelessness. Gondor's weaknesses greatly magnified, Sauron's armies shown in full strength, but never the whole picture. Denethor resisted domination, but not despair. Saruman, meanwhile, succumbed to pride and chose his own, twisted path, selfishly aligning with Sauron's goals while plotting to replace him.
In TA 3009 to 3017, Gollum was captured by Sauron's servants and brought to Barad-dûr. He was tortured. From him, Sauron extracted two crucial words, Baggins and Shire. He didn't yet know where that was, but now he knew the ring had been in the hands of a hobbit, and that this hobbit had a name. He released Gollum, expecting that his hatred and the ring's lure would pull him toward its location. At the same time, Sauron prepared massive forces in Mordor, coordinated attacks in the north and south, searched for signs of the ring's movement.
In 3018, Sauron began open war. He sent a major probe against Osgiliath, testing Gondor's strength and masking the movement of the Nazgûl. He also launched attacks from Dol Guldur against Thranduil and Lorien, forcing Gollum's escape from elven captivity. The Nazgûl crossed the river Anduin in secret and rode north, cloaked and terrifying, seeking the Shire and Baggins. From Sauron's perspective, this was no longer about conquest alone. The ring was the prize. With it, he could regain his full, overwhelming power. Without it, he feared some unknown plan was unfolding against him. When the Nazgûl failed to capture Frodo at Weathertop and were washed away at the ford of Bruinen, Sauron learned something grim. The Elves were still stronger than he liked to admit, and there was a power at work, Gandalf, Elrond, and others, coordinating resistance in ways he couldn't fully see.
Later, when Pippin looked into the Orthanc Stone, Sauron saw a halfling, not Saruman. A prisoner, perhaps, wearing or near the ring, as he assumed. He concluded Saruman had either captured the ring or would soon be forced to hand it over. The problem was essentially solved. He taunted the halfling and announced he would soon send for the prize. But then, Aragorn revealed himself in the Palantir as heir of Elendil and wielder of the reforged sword. Now Sauron had to reconsider. Had Saruman been defeated? Did Aragorn have the ring? Were the heirs of Numenor rising again, stronger than expected? Uncertain, he chose to act quickly rather than wait for perfect clarity. He ordered an all-out assault on Minas Tirith, expanded attacks in the north, Dale, Erebor, Lorien, Mirkwood. He believed if the ring was with Aragorn or Gondor, they would be forced to use it in battle. Once used, it would reveal itself, and he could claim it.
The Battle of the Pelennor Fields nearly broke Gondor. Minas Tirith was besieged. Denethor fell into madness. The Witch King was slain, but at great cost. From Sauron's view, this was a major but acceptable setback. Gondor was weakened, Rohan had spent its strength. He could still gather another army from Mordor and crush them. What he did not expect was the next move. Instead of waiting defensively, the captains of the West, Aragorn, Gandalf, Éomer, and others, marched directly to the Black Gate. This made no military sense, unless they were trying to distract him. Gandalf was counting on one thing, that Sauron, arrogant and deeply convinced of his own worldview, would assume. The ring was with this army. No one would willingly send the ring-bearer alone into Mordor. The Baggins he sought must be somewhere among these commanders. So Sauron focused his attention on the army at his doorstep. He sent out his remaining legions, the mouth of Sauron, to parley, all the terror he could muster. Behind his back, 2 hobbits climbed toward Mount Doom.
On the slopes of Orodruin, Frodo finally reached the crack of doom. And failed. He claimed the ring for himself. At that instant, Sauron felt the ring being put on, saw Frodo through the ring's gaze, understood what Gandalf and the others had truly done. He sent the Nazgul in a desperate rush toward the mountain. They arrived too late. Gollum, seizing the ring, fell into the fire. The One Ring, the vessel of Sauron's power, the anchor of his will, was unmade. In that moment, the foundations of Barad-dûr gave way. The Dark Tower collapsed. The Nazgul perished. Armies of Mordor faltered and fled. Sauron's spirit rose like a great shadow above Mordor, reaching out one last time in rage and despair. Was driven away by a great wind. He could no longer regain shape or power. He did not die like a mortal, but he became permanently impotent, a will with no body, no ring, and no means to act. His story as a force in the world had ended.
In the end, Sauron is not interesting simply because he is evil. He is chilling because he began as someone who loved order and lost sight of mercy. He believed that control was more important than freedom. He never understood that true harmony can't be forced, it has to be chosen. As Mairon, he admired the beauty of craft. As Sauron, he turned that craft into chains. He forged mighty artifacts, built towering fortresses, commanded countless armies, but he never learned the one lesson his story illustrates over and over. The more you try to control everything, the more fragile your power becomes. Because all it takes is one hobbit, one act of unexpected courage, one tiny crack in the grand design, and the Dark Lord's entire machine can collapse.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of Sauron, from Mairon the Admirable to the Shadow of Mordor, you're in the right place. This is Echoes of Middle-earth, where we explore the stories behind the stories, the lives of the Valar and Maiar, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the legends, tragedies, and quiet moments Tolkien never forgot. If you'd like more journeys like this, subscribe. Leave a comment with who you want us to cover next, Morgoth, Ainur, Galadriel, or perhaps the Blue Wizards, and share this video with a fellow lore lover. Until next time, may the light of Arendil guide your path, and may you never hear the whisper of the eye upon your heart.